Alright folks, tonight we're diving headfirst into the gloriously bizarre realm of medieval beauty standards, where looking like a recently exhumed corpse was considered high fashion. Forget glowing skin and rosy cheeks. The medieval elite aspired to resemble someone who'd just been politely drained of all vitality. So before you get too comfortable, smash that like button if you enjoy my content. No pressure though, only if you're genuinely entertained. Drop a comment with your location and local time. It's always fascinating to see our global audience tuning in. Now dim those lights, maybe crank up a fan for some ambient white noise, and let's time travel together. In medieval Europe, pallor wasn't a sign of vitamin deficiency, it was a flex. That translucent, vein-mapping complexion silently announced, "Darling, I'm so wealthy I've never seen daylight." While modern influencers chase sun-kissed glow, their medieval counterparts would faint at the thought. A tan that screamed peasant labor. Think sweaty farmhands and milkmaids. The paler you were, the higher your social standing. And we're not talking light foundation, pale. We mean full Victorian child ghost levels of spectral whiteness. Of course, biology rarely cooperates with fashion demands. Enter the medieval beauty hacks, noblewomen, and occasionally men, slathered lead-based white powder on their faces, achieving that coveted consumptive aristocrat chic. Bonus? The leads slowly poisoned them, because beauty has always demanded sacrifice. Some used vinegar-soaked cloths as DIY skin bleachers, while others opted for crushed pearl and egg-white masks that left cheeks feeling like stale omelets. The truly dedicated painted blue veins onto their skin, because nothing says nobility like pretending your epidermis might rupture at any moment. Literature reinforced this aesthetic. Romantic poems described women as pale as milk or white as winter moonlight, which basically meant this maiden looks 3 breaths away from collapsing. This wasn't just vanity, it was social semiotics. Fragility equaled privilege. If you could afford to look delicate, you'd already won the medieval status game. Beauty regimens back then were essentially slow-motion chemical warfare against oneself. The lead-based foundation, a generous term, was made by corroding metal with vinegar into a fine, deadly powder. Daily application gave that smooth, matte finish until your skin started peeling off in diplomatic chunks, which was ironically seen as proof the makeup was working. The routine often included mercury-based rouge for that healthy, dyeing of heavy metal poisoning flush, and egg-white glazes for maximum ceramic doll vibes. If it came from an alchemist's shelf or barnyard, medieval beauties smeared it on their faces. The consequences? Chronic fatigue, skin ulcers, hair loss, and premature death, none of which deterred the nobility. When the alternative was being mistaken for someone who knew how to churn butter, slow poisoning seemed a reasonable trade-off. Even male courtiers occasionally powdered up during the Renaissance, proving vanity transcends gender when social climbing is involved. Perhaps the most eyebrow-raising trend, pun intended, was the obsession with towering foreheads, achieved by plucking hairlines back and sometimes removing eyebrows entirely. The ideal forehead suggested aristocratic intellect, or at least proved you'd never done manual labor. Women used everything from hot tweezers to depilatory creams made of cat dung and vinegar-soaked leeches. The result? Portraits showing women with foreheads so expansive you could host a jousting tournament across them. Fashion accessories like tight hoods and cone-shaped hennons accentuated this look. Some women even drew higher hairlines with makeup, medieval contouring at its finest. The no-eyebrow trend wasn't universal. Some regions kept thin arches, but the message was clear: visible brows were social suicide. Even men at court occasionally groomed theirs, though full removal remained rare unless lost in theological debates, a very specific medieval hazard. This curated, almost angelic aesthetic reveals medieval beauty wasn't about looking natural. It was about displaying symbolic purity and economic disengagement from agriculture. The commitment was real. One wrong move, and you'd literally lose face. Now let's talk about the medieval obsession with blushing cheeks, but not the healthy, post-yoga class kind. We're talking about that perfect, just heard a mildly scandalous poem, flush, or like you stepped outside for exactly 30 seconds, but God forbid any longer. Wouldn't want to accidentally tan. This delicate rose tint wasn't just about attractiveness. It signaled youth, fertility, and most importantly, that you were still alive enough to procreate. A real concern when everyone's poisoning themselves with lead makeup. The church, ever the fun police, considered rouge a one-way ticket to Vanityville. Population, your damned soul. But medieval women weren't about to let some celibate priests dictate their cheekbone game. They got creative with beetroot juice, crushed strawberries, and even cochineal, a vibrant red dye made from, brace yourself, crushed insects. Some used wine sediment or red ochre, carefully dabbing it on with fingers when no one was looking. The goal? That I definitely didn't put effort into this natural glow. Get caught with suspiciously rosy cheeks, and you might be accused of imitating French courtiers, the ultimate medieval insult. Or worse, prostitutes. Even nuns allegedly kept some beetroot stain handy for feast days, because apparently the Lord loves a tasteful pop of color behind the cloister. The application process was hilariously clandestine. Imagine medieval women sneaking rouge like teenagers with contraband lip gloss, then denying everything if complimented. Oh, this must be the winter wind. Meanwhile, blonde hair was considered divine literally. The Virgin Mary was often depicted as blonde in medieval art, geographical accuracy be damned, setting the gold standard for beauty. Natural blondes were considered blessed, but since hair darkens with age, medieval women turned to some inventive lightening techniques. Sunbasking with honey and lemon juice was common, basically the OG highlights, along with saffron or chamomile rinses. The truly dedicated used urine, yes, really, as a bleaching agent, because nothing says heavenly glow like fermented bodily fluids. Hair texture mattered too. Long, flowing waves were the ideal, but only for unmarried women. The moment you said, I do, your luscious locks became contraband, hidden under enough veils and wimples to make a nun blush. Noble women braided their hair into elaborate styles with silk ribbons and jeweled nets, while men with flowing golden locks were romanticized in poetry, medieval Fabio vibes. The hennin, those iconic cone-shaped hats reaching 2 to 3 feet skyward, became the ultimate status symbol. The taller your hat, the higher your rank, and the more door frames you smacked into. These architectural marvels required serious commitment. Women often shaved their foreheads to make them fit properly. The hats were made of silk or velvet with sheer veils that constantly got caught in candles. Medieval OSHA violations waiting to happen. Off the battlefield, medieval beauty standards demanded women look delicate and slightly ethereal, like someone who subsisted on courtly poetry and the occasional grape. The ideal silhouette was slim but not sickly, with cinched waists and soft curves. Tight lacing, the precursor to corsets, helped achieve this, though being too thin-wrist looking plague-ridden. Diet tips included fennel for digestion and rose petals for breath, because nothing says balanced nutrition like eating flowers. Eyes were considered windows to the soul, specifically large, soulful windows with a side of pious melancholy. Light-colored eyes were prized in Northern Europe, while darker eyes gained favor in the South, especially with a good dowry. Some women lined their eyes with soot, medieval smoky eye, but most relied on strategic candlelight and downward glances to accentuate their gaze. Interestingly, slightly teary eyes were admired. Nothing says devout, like perpetually looking on the verge of a religious epiphany. Breath, however, was medieval beauty's dirty little secret. While poets waxed lyrical about rosebud lips, they tactfully avoided mentioning what happened when those lips opened. Dental hygiene was aspirational at best. The minty fresh concept hadn't been invented, so people chewed parsley, fennel seeds, or cinnamon sticks like medieval gum. Apothecaries sold herbal mouth rinses with sage and myrrh, while toothbrushing involved rubbing teeth with cloth or chew sticks. Bad breath was so common that noble women developed elaborate avoidance strategies, standing at arm's length during conversations, using fans, and carrying pomanders, scented oranges studded with cloves, to mask odors. Because when your breath could kill a small animal, you learned to speak in the general direction of a scented orb. Smiling was practically a social risk, with dental care being what it was. Visible teeth were a liability. By age 30, most people's teeth ranged from questionable to horror movie prop. The ideal was a demure closed-lip smile, suggesting you were contemplating sonnets, not hiding a graveyard in your mouth. Some used sage or salt tooth powders, but mostly people just didn't smile widely. Art from the period rarely shows open-mouthed expressions. Even angels keep their lips sealed, probably because heaven doesn't cover dental plans. Let's shatter some illusions about medieval masculinity, because gentlemen, your grooming routine would make a modern metrosexual weep. Forget the rough and rugged stereotype. Medieval noblemen were out here contouring with the best of them. The ideal knight wasn't some grimy brute. He was a lean, chiseled poetry enthusiast who could swing a sword and drop a sonnet. Think less mud-crusted barbarian, more Tudor-era Timothy Chalamet. Physical standards were exacting. Broad shoulders, strong legs, and the ability to wear armor without toppling over like a drunkard. But crucially, nobility prized refinement over brute strength. Looking like you could fight was desirable. Looking like you actually fought peasants daily? Social suicide. Facial hair walked a tightrope. Well-groomed beards signaled maturity, but clean-shaven faces, achieved with the era's terrifyingly sharp razors, projected youthful elegance. Hair care was serious business. Shoulder-length curls were the medieval equivalent of a power suit, with men using heated curling rods. Yes, really, and herbal rinses for shine. Some even bleached their locks golden, because nothing says, "I've never done manual labor," like sun-kissed highlights achieved via lemon juice and sheer privilege. The truly vain might spend 45 minutes having a page boy style their fringe, the original blowout appointment. Clothing was engineered to enhance the silhouette. Padded shoulders created that V-shape, cinched waists accentuated posture, and fitted tunics showcased assets. Nobles didn't slouch. They glided with an air of disdain, their every step whispering, "I inherited land and a falcon before breakfast." Even muscular men downplayed it. Visible strength suggested you might haul barrels for fun, and we can't have that. Now, let's talk scent, because in an era where bathing was optional and plumbing fictional, smelling like a rose garden was aspirational. Enter the pomander, a clove-stuffed metal orb worn around the neck like a medieval car air freshener. Nobles also tucked scented sachets into clothing linings, creating a trail of lavender and desperation. For special occasions, perfumed gloves and combs, because if your hair can't smell like a spice market, why even attend court? Sweat management was an art form. Linen undershirts absorbed moisture and were washable, unlike expensive outer garments, while strategic herb bundles masked everything else. The truly committed slept on rose petal-stuffed pillows, because nothing says, "I have my life together," like bedding that smells like a bridal suite. But the real flex? Dry bathing. Wiping yourself with a cloth before dousing in scented water and pretending you'd bathed. The church discouraged communal baths. Nudity equals sin. So aristocrats perfected the art of smelling expensive while being fundamentally grimy. Now, the elephant in the chamber pot. Teeth. Medieval dentistry involved prayers, pliers, and zero painkillers. Bad breath was so ubiquitous that standing at arm's length during conversations became standard. The wealthy chewed cloves or anise seeds, while others rubbed teeth with chalk, the original whitening strips. Tooth loss was inevitable, but admitting it? Crass. Hence the closed-lip smile, less mysterious allure, more hiding a crumbling dental arch. Ironically, the working class often had better oral hygiene. Coarse bread acted as natural scrubbers, but their tanned skin and calloused hands betrayed their status. The nobility's paradox? Rotting teeth were a status symbol, proving you could afford sugar, imported at outrageous prices, while peasants gnawed on fibrous vegetables that kept their teeth intact, but their social mobility non-existent. The medieval mirror was a merciless critic. Without modern lighting, Nobles relied on polished metal reflections that softened flaws, the original Instagram filter. Candlelight became the era's ring light, casting forgiving glows during evening gatherings. A knight might practice his smolder by firelight, knowing the flickering shadows would highlight his jawline and obscure his emerging bald patch. Grooming tools were terrifying by today's standards. Bone-handled tweezers for rogue hairs, pumice stones for calluses, and arsenic-laced depilatory creams. The message? Beauty required suffering, preferably while maintaining an expression of serene indifference. Now let's pull back the velvet curtain on medieval beauty's darkest secret, its intimate dance with mortality. This wasn't just vanity. It was a macabre performance where the line between cosmetic and corpse blurred spectacularly. The lead-laced rouge powder that gave noblewomen their signature ghostly pallor, also used to embalm bodies. The vinegar-soaked linen they draped over their faces, the same solution undertakers used to freshen up cadavers. Medieval beauty standards didn't just flirt with death. They moved in together and shared a toothbrush. Take the infamous Venetian ceruse, a mixture of lead and vinegar that ate through skin like acid rain on marble. Women applied it with religious devotion, watching their complexions turn eerily smooth as the poison seeped into their bloodstream. Early symptoms included grayish skin, ironically requiring more makeup, and gumline discoloration, conveniently hidden behind demure smiles. By the time tremors and organ failure set in, the user was often too addicted to the aesthetic to stop. The parallels to modern beauty standards are unsettling. Like today's Botox regimens, medieval women endured facial paralysis for their ideal. Lead poisoning caused muscle stiffness that smoothed expressions into perpetually placid masks. The church condemned these practices while praising the resulting serene countenance, creating a theological catch-22 that would make a philosopher weep. Even hair removal had mortal stakes. The quicklime and cat dung depilatory cream wasn't just foul-smelling. It chemically burned hair follicles shut. Successful applications left skin baby smooth. Failures resulted in chemical burns that could become gangrenous. Yet women still lined up, because nothing says marriage material like risking sepsis for a hairless hairline. The most grotesque beauty hack? Venomous rouge, a cheek tint laced with mercury sulfide that created that coveted consumptive flush. Aristocrats knew the vibrant red pigment, cinnabar, caused neurological damage, but reasoned that dementia was a fair trade for cheekbones that glowed like poisoned apples. Some even mixed it with crushed pearls for extra luminosity, creating a cosmetic equivalent of sprinkling glitter on a time bomb. Ironically, these deadly practices created their own demand. As lead-poisoned skin developed lesions, the market for corrective concealers boomed. A 14th century Italian manual actually recommended applying leeches to drain excess blood from facial ulcers, the medieval equivalent of getting filler dissolved at a med spa. The gender divide in toxic beauty was stark. While women slathered on lead and mercury, men's grooming dangers leaned more toward the accidentally suicidal. Hair tonics containing silver nitrate could turn dark locks gunmetal gray permanently, the original premature aging scandal. Beard oils laced with quicklime caused chemical burns masquerading as close shaves. Even the most basic medieval cologne, a musk and ammonia concoction, could knock out a small mammal at 5 paces. Yet for all their risks, these rituals fulfilled a deeper societal function. In an era where plague could carry off half a town by Tuesday, controlling one's appearance became a psychological bulwark against chaos. The meticulous application of poisonous makeup mirrored the priest's ritual vestments. Both were armor against a world where death lurked in every shadow. The ultimate irony? These beauty standards birthed early consumer protection laws. Venice's 1432 anti-ceruse edict banned lead-based makeup, after one too many noble women dropped dead at balls, while French guilds required mercury rouge to be labeled with skull and crossbones. Enforcement was laughable. Aristocrats simply had servants procure the contraband, proving that premium beauty loopholes are as old as taxation itself. Modern analysis of medieval graves reveals the horrifying legacy. Noblewomen's skeletons show lead concentrations 300x normal levels, with mercury-laced soil still leaching from their jawbones centuries later. Their male counterparts exhibit telltale pitting and nasal bones from prolonged perfume use, the olfactory equivalent of this guy vape. Perhaps most haunting are the beauty tools buried with their owners. Silver-handled mirrors now clouded with patina, ivory combs still threaded with golden hairs, and tiny ceramic pots that once held enough poison to kill a village. These weren't just vanity items. They were time capsules of desperation, whispering across centuries about the price people paid to belong. Let's shatter another myth. Medieval beauty wasn't just for the living. The dead got full glam treatment too, proving vanity truly is the one mortal sin that transcends the grave. Embalmers in medieval Europe moonlighted as posthumous makeup artists, using many of the same toxic cosmetics favored by their living clients. A noblewoman might spend her life slathering on lead powder, only to have her corpse slathered with an even thicker layer post-mortem. The ultimate death becomes her moment. Funeral aesthetics reached absurd heights. Wealthy families demanded their deceased look lifelike, read, heavily made up, for viewings, leading to some truly macabre innovations. Cotton stuffed under the skin plumped sunken cheeks, while wax seals gave corpses that coveted dewy glow. Eyes were propped open with wire frames or replaced with painted glass replicas, because nothing says rest in peace like staring blankly into eternity with dull eyes. Hair received special attention. Women were often buried with their most elaborate headdresses, the sharp pins securing them rusting into skulls over centuries. Archaeologists now use these corrosion patterns to reconstruct lost hairstyles. Men's beards were meticulously groomed, sometimes even perfumed, a final middle finger to mortality's inevitable decay. The wealthiest took corpse presentation to grotesque extremes. When England's Queen Eleanor of Castile died in 1290, her embalmer created a creepy doll version of her corpse, organs removed, skin treated with spices and wax, then dressed in her coronation robes. This effigy was paraded through towns for weeks, while her actual decaying body followed discreetly behind in a lead coffin. Talk about commitment to the aesthetic. This obsession spawned an entire industry of death beauticians. Barber surgeons, the same guys who'd bleed you for a cold, offered premium embalming packages featuring mercury-based skin preservation, keeps your loved one rosy for up to 6 months, gold leaf tooth embellishment, because yellowed teeth are so peasant, fragrance injections, masking that earthy decomposition scent with rose water. The middle classes settled for vinegar sponges stuffed in body cavities, while the poor made do with quicklime, a budget-friendly option that basically turned grandma into a science experiment. But here's the twist. These practices inadvertently advanced medical science. Embalmers were the first to document how toxins like lead and mercury accumulated in organs over time. Their meticulous notes on tissue degradation patterns became foundational texts for early pathologists. That arsenic-laced face cream? Its preservative properties revolutionized anatomical specimen preservation at medical schools. Religious authorities oscillated between horror and pragmatism. While decrying corpse vanity as sacrilege, they quietly approved cosmetic embalming for saintly relics, a loophole that let churches display incorruptible saints who were really just medieval taxidermy projects. The Vatican's collection still features 12th century saints with waxen faces and silk-covered skeletons, their jeweled eye sockets following visitors around the room. Modern archaeology owes much to these morbid beauty standards. The lead and mercury that poisoned the nobility also preserved them remarkably well. Toxic makeup acted as a crude embalming agent, leaving noble women's skin tissue intact enough for modern analysis to reveal their last meals, chronic illnesses, and even approximate age at death from lipstick traces alone. Perhaps most poetically, the very poisons that shortened these individuals' lives now allow us to hear their stories centuries later. A 2019 study of a 14th century Italian noblewoman's remains found her hair still contained enough lead isotopes to trace her movements between family estates, a toxic diary written in her bones. The takeaway? Medieval people didn't just live with death, they accessorized it. Whether applying venomous rouge to living cheeks or gilding a corpse's fingernails, they transformed mortality into another canvas for self-expression. In doing so, they created an accidental legacy where vanity became both destroyer and preserver, erasing lives even as it etched their stories permanently into history. Now let's talk about the medieval equivalent of Instagram filters, the art of manipulating perception through carefully curated lighting, angles, and good old-fashioned deception. Forget smartphone apps. These folks were masters of illusion centuries before Photoshop existed. The medieval mirror wasn't just a reflective surface, it was a strategic weapon in the beauty arms race. Polished metal mirrors, the precursors to glass ones, were prized possessions, often ornately framed and kept under lock and key. But here's the catch. These bronze or silver mirrors naturally produced softer, warmer reflections that smoothed out imperfections. The medieval version of that soft glow filter we all love literally baked into their technology. Noblewomen would position them near candlelight to create the perfect self-illuminating effect, the original ring light setup. Portrait artists were the medieval equivalent of celebrity photographers with unlimited editing privileges. A 15th century painter's contract often included clauses like, shall render the subject's double chin as a strong jawline, and discreetly minimize the nose by at least 2 finger widths. Some painters kept pre-stretched canvases on hand to accommodate last-minute requests like, make me look 20 years younger, or maybe just paint my deceased husband's younger brother instead. The fashion equivalent of photo editing came in the form of strategic clothing choices. That iconic medieval hourglass silhouette, often achieved through deceptive tailoring. Dresses were cut on the bias to create the illusion of curves where none existed, while padded hip rolls, the original booty enhancers, gave women that coveted childbearing hips look. Men weren't exempt. Those puffy doublets and hose weren't just stylish, they concealed a multitude of figure flaws. A knight with skinny legs? No problem. Just add some quilted padding to the calves. Even architecture played its part. Castle staircases were deliberately built winding and narrow so ladies could descend slowly, their gowns flowing dramatically behind them. Windows were positioned to cast the most flattering light on the lord and lady's seats in the great hall. Some nobles even had beauty chambers, small rooms with specially angled windows that provided the most youthful, shadow-minimizing illumination for daily grooming. The medieval version of catfishing? Portrait miniatures, tiny paintings that nobles would send to potential marriage partners. These were essentially Tinder profile pics from hell, with artists routinely taking creative liberties. A 1423 letter from a disgruntled Italian groom complains that his bride's portrait showed a Venus, but upon meeting discovered a face that could frighten Death himself. The resulting scandal led to one of history's first recorded cases of catfishing litigation. Makeup application was its own form of optical illusion. That iconic high forehead look, often achieved by plucking not just the hairline, but also lowering the eyebrows, creating the illusion of more facial real estate. Lips were carefully outlined just outside their natural border, the original lip liner trick, to appear fuller. Some women even used a trick of applying white lead powder to the center of their lips while leaving the edges natural, creating a 3D pout effect centuries before Kylie Jenner. The most brazen deception? Hairpieces. Medieval wigs made from horsehair or, in truly extravagant cases, the hair of servants, were common among nobility. One account describes a duchess whose hair blew off during a windy procession, revealing the dozen peasant girls whose braids had been woven into her headdress. The scandal was so great, she entered a convent shortly after. Medieval cancel culture at its finest. Even scent played into the illusion game. Perfumes weren't just about smelling nice. They created olfactory mirages. A popular trick involved layering different scents at pulse points, so the fragrance would evolve throughout the day. creating the impression the wearer was somehow becoming more beautiful as time passed. Some courtesans were said to use different perfumes on each wrist, so a suitor would get a different impression depending on which side he stood. The ultimate medieval filter? The veil. This multi-purpose accessory could soften harsh features, conceal skin imperfections, and even act as a primitive motion blur effect when walking. Thinner veils provided a soft focus look, while heavier ones created dramatic silhouettes. Some inventive noblewomen attached small weights to the edges of their veils to ensure they draped in the most flattering possible manner. What makes these historical beauty hacks so fascinating is how little has really changed. The same insecurities, the same desperate attempts to control perception, the same gap between reality and presentation, just with different tools. The medieval noble fretting over whether her portrait was sufficiently flattering would feel right at home in our age of selfies and face-tuning apps. Perhaps the only real difference is that when a medieval portrait lied, at least it took actual skill to create the deception rather than just sliding a beauty filter to 100%. Let's pull back the tapestry on medieval beauty's best-kept secret. Its shockingly progressive moments that defied gender norms and social hierarchies. Behind the lead poisoning and eyebrow plucking existed a beauty underground where marginalized groups carved out spaces of unexpected autonomy. This was the medieval equivalent of beauty counterculture, and it's time we gave credit where credit's due. Take medieval bathhouses, those steam-filled sanctuaries that became unexpected equalizers. While the church preached against public bathing, these communal spaces fostered surprising intimacy across class lines. A 13th century Parisian bathhouse ledger records noblewomen and silk merchants' wives sharing beauty tips while soaking in the same rose-scented waters. Even more radical, some bathhouses employed male beauty consultants, early estheticians who discreetly advised women on hair removal and skincare, their existence carefully omitted from official records. Jewish perfumers and Moorish cosmeticians operated as medieval beauty's shadow elite. While banned from most guilds, these marginalized groups dominated the trade of rare ingredients. Saffron from Spain, coal from Egypt, rose attar from Persia. A 1392 inventory from a Catalan apothecary reveals Jewish women running clandestine beauty clubs, where Christian noblewomen secretly purchased hair dyes under the guise of buying medicinal herbs. The ingredients lists read like alchemical poetry: crushed lapis lazuli for eye shimmer, fermented pomegranate for lip stain, gold leaf suspended in almond oil for that coveted divine glow. Then there were the Beguines, unmarried laywomen who formed self-sufficient communities across northern Europe. These pragmatic mystics ran some of the period's most sophisticated herbal gardens, producing beauty treatments with legitimate medicinal value. Their recipe books contain the first recorded use of chamomile compresses for dark circles and oatmeal poultices for irritated skin, centuries before modern dermatology. Even more remarkably, they provided these treatments to poor women for free, creating Europe's earliest known sliding-scale beauty services. Prostitutes, often dismissed as moral failures, were in fact medieval beauty innovators. Forced to maintain attractiveness without access to noblewomen's resources, they pioneered early versions of what we'd now call drugstore dupes. Crushed mulberry juice stood in for expensive cochineal rouge, while beer foam became a volumizing hair treatment. Their most lasting contribution? The first recorded use of cold cream as makeup remover, a mixture of beeswax and rosewater that stripped off lead paint without requiring scrubbing and more skin damage. The transgender and non-binary communities of medieval Europe also left their mark on beauty history. Court records from Venice reveal cases of feminine men fined for wearing pearl-encrusted hairnets, while London's Molly houses, secret queer gathering spots, were known for their elaborate cross-dressing beauty rituals. A 1456 German manuscript even details the case of a knight who lived as a woman for 3 decades, her meticulous grooming habits, including a signature technique of plucking individual neck hairs with silver tweezers, becoming local legend. Disabled individuals carved out their own beauty niches. A remarkable set of 14th century ivory prosthetics found in Burgundy shows artificial noses and chins designed not just for function but aesthetics. Some are even painted with delicate freckles. Manuscript illustrations depict women with mobility aids decorating their canes with ribbons and flowers, transforming assistive devices into fashion statements centuries before the disability rights movement. Even peasants participated in beauty subversion. While sumptuary laws forbade them from wearing certain fabrics or colors, rural communities developed ingenious workarounds. Straw hats were woven with hidden silk threads that caught the light. Woolen gowns were embroidered with secret floral patterns only visible in certain lights. And the most daring applied beet juice stains to mimic noblewomen's rouge during festivals. The church's attempts to suppress these practices often backfired spectacularly. When bishops banned scented gloves as vanity, perfumers simply began infusing the leather with fragrance during tanning, creating the first designer leather goods. A 1327 papal bull condemning unnatural hair colors directly led to the popularity of subtle honey highlights that could be passed off as sun-kissed. Perhaps most surprisingly, some medieval beauty rebels found unlikely allies in the medical community. Progressive physicians argued that certain cosmetics actually prevented disease. Rosemary hair rinses warded off lice. Lavender sachets and headdresses reduced migraines. And yes, even lead powder was initially prescribed, in small doses, to treat skin ulcers. A 1375 medical text from Salerno recommends almond oil massages for melancholic humors, essentially prescribing spa days for depression. These stories matter because they reveal a medieval world far more nuanced than the Dark Ages stereotype. For every repressive beauty standard, there existed pockets of resistance and reinvention. The same cultures that demanded noblewomen pluck their hairlines back to their crowns also fostered spaces where Moorish perfumers, Jewish herbalists, and gender non-conforming knights could, however briefly, rewrite the rules of attraction on their own terms. Let's shatter another stained glass window of misconception. Medieval beauty standards weren't frozen in time like some illuminated manuscript. They evolved with the seismic shifts of history, each century bringing its own cosmetic revolutions that would make today's TikTok beauty trends look tame. This was an era where a new shade of rouge could spark theological debates, and a haircut might get you accused of heresy. The early Middle Ages, 500–1000 CE, favored a rugged aesthetic. Think less pale porcelain doll and more healthy Viking raider. Germanic tribes considered shiny hair a mark of vitality, using bacon fat as primitive hair gel, the original pomade. Anglo-Saxon women prized rosy cheeks from outdoor work, with medical texts actually prescribing horseback riding as a facial treatment to bring color to the maiden's visage. This was beauty born of necessity, where a scar could be considered attractive if it came from battle rather than disease. Then came the 12th century renaissance of ugliness. Yes, you read that right. As crusaders brought back Middle Eastern luxuries, European courts developed a perverse fascination with exotic deformities. Noblewomen at the court of Eleanor of Aquitaine wore prosthetic humps to mimic spinal curvatures seen in Byzantine icons. Men cultivated patchy beards to resemble lepers, believing it showed worldliness. A Venetian chronicler describes one count who paid a small fortune to have his perfectly good teeth filed into jagged points, inspired by descriptions of Saracen warriors. The Black Death, 1347 to 1351, turned beauty standards upside down overnight. With half of Europe dead, survivors embraced a carpe diem aesthetic. Lead makeup fell out of favor as people noticed it made plague symptoms worse. Who knew poisoning yourself during a pandemic was a bad idea? The new look was fever chic, slightly flushed skin, dilated pupils achieved with belladonna drops, and that just sweated through the apocalypse glow. Practical hygiene suddenly became fashionable, with public steam baths reopening after centuries of church disapproval. By the 15th century, the Renaissance was brewing and beauty got mathematical. Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, proportions became the gold standard. Women plucked hairlines to make their faces perfectly oval, while men grew their hair to exactly 1.5 times their chin length. In Florence, cosmeticians used compasses to apply beauty marks in geometrically perfect arrangements. A surviving 1482 ledger from a Sienese noblewoman details payments to a face measurer, who ensured her features aligned with the golden ratio. The Reformation, 1517 onwards, split beauty along religious lines. Protestant women embraced a natural look, still involving hours of preparation, while Catholic courts doubled down on extravagance. A German pamphlet from 1523 decries Italian women's use of the devil's rouge, made from crushed beetles, while Venetian courtesans were simultaneously developing the first waterproof makeup using fish bladder glue. Some shifts were driven by pure economics. When the Little Ice Age, 1300 to 1850, made wine production plummet, the sudden scarcity of grape-based cosmetics birthed a thriving black market. Parisian court records show cases of women being fined for smuggling rotten wine sediment to use as blush. Meanwhile in England, the wool trade boom made lanolin, grease from sheep's wool, the hot new hair conditioner. Though getting the smell out required rosewater rinses that cost more than the average peasant's yearly salary. Technological innovations caused seismic shifts. The 1450s invention of the printing press spread beauty tips faster than ever before. A 1486 Book of the Toilette became the medieval equivalent of Vogue, with woodcut illustrations showing how to achieve the latest Milanese eyeliner flicks. By 1500, traveling beauty lecturers were demonstrating the use of the newly invented magnifying mirror for precision eyebrow work, though many clergy condemned these as vanity amplifiers. Colonial expansion from the 1490s onward flooded Europe with new beauty ingredients and new prejudices. Spanish women initially rejected chocolate as a savage cosmetic ingredient until a clever marketer rebranded it as the Aztec secret to youthful skin. The same happened with Brazilian Brazilwood lip stains, which only gained acceptance after being renamed Cardinal's Red to imply church approval. Perhaps the most surprising evolution was in men's grooming. The 14th century fashion for clean-shaven faces gave way to 15th century beard cults after a Byzantine emperor's visit inspired European rulers to grow facial hair as a power display. By 1520, beard maintenance had become so elaborate that Holy Roman Emperor Charles V employed a dedicated beard barber who traveled with him to war, complete with a portable beard straightening iron. These shifts weren't just about aesthetics. They reflected deeper societal changes. When the 1381 Peasants' Revolt threatened the English aristocracy, noblewomen abruptly stopped wearing their hair loose, a peasant style, and adopted the horned headdress, literally creating physical barriers between themselves and the lower classes. Similarly, when syphilis ravaged Europe in the 1490s, the sudden popularity of beauty patches wasn't just decorative. They covered the disease's telltale source. What makes medieval beauty's evolution so fascinating is how it mirrors our own era's rapid changes. The way a global pandemic, then plague, now COVID, reshapes our relationship with cosmetics, how political upheavals manifest in hairstyles, or how technological advances, then printing presses, now smartphones, democratize beauty knowledge while also amplifying insecurities. The more things change. Now let's pull back the heavy velvet curtains on medieval beauty's most theatrical stage, the shocking, scandalous, and downright bizarre beauty rituals that would make even the most adventurous modern influencer blanch. This was an era where cosmetic innovation walked hand in hand with mortal danger, where the line between spa treatment and self-mutilation was thinner than a strand of medieval silk thread. Take the dragon's blood facial, a 14th century anti-aging treatment that involved slathering one's face with actual mercury sulfide mixed with bat's blood. The promised result? Skin as smooth as a maiden's soul. The actual result? Third-degree chemical burns that required months of healing under leech applications. Yet Venetian court records show noble women lining up for this torture, convinced the searing pain meant it was working deep within the humors. Hair care reached new heights of absurdity with the phoenix nest style popular in 15th century Burgundy. Women would have their hair teased into an enormous nest-like structure, then have live songbirds, with legs carefully tied with silk threads, placed inside the dew. The birds' fluttering wings created constant movement, the medieval equivalent of hair extensions with built-in animation. Predictably, these avian accessories often panicked, leading to accounts of noblewomen sprinting through castle halls with shrieking finches tangled in their tresses. For the truly committed, there was pearl implantation, a precursor to modern dermal piercings where physicians used hollow needles to insert tiny seed pearls under the skin of the cheeks and décolletage. The procedure, excruciating even by medieval standards, promised a moonlit glow as the pearls diffused light through the epidermis. The inevitable infections were treated with moldy bread poultices, an accidental discovery of penicillin's properties centuries before Fleming. Men weren't exempt from the madness. The beard of bees was a short-lived 13th century German trend where beekeepers would coat aristocrats' facial hair with honey, then allow bees to settle on it. The vibrating insects supposedly stimulated hair growth, while their venom tightened the skin. Contemporary illustrations show proud nobles sitting motionless for hours, their faces obscured by living, buzzing masks, the ultimate test of medieval machismo. The most extreme beauty statement? Demon's teeth, a 12th century Norman practice where canine teeth were filed into sharp points and inlaid with slivers of obsidian. While initially adopted to mimic Viking warriors, it became a macabre fashion statement among nobility. One abbey's records complain of young lords disrupting mass with their hellish grins that catch the candlelight most unnervingly. The trend died out, along with several patients, when filed teeth began snapping off during meals. Bathing rituals reached new levels of theatricality with the Seven Waters ceremony practiced in Moorish Spain. Participants progressed through 7 chambers, each featuring a different scented bath, from rose petal to liquid amber, while musicians played increasingly complex rhythms said to align the bather's humors. The final chamber contained a mirror made of polished black marble that supposedly revealed one's true beauty, though historians suspect the week-long sensory overload left most people seeing stars regardless. The lover's brand was perhaps the most poetic and painful trend. Couples would heat matching signet rings over candle flames, then press them simultaneously onto each other's thighs. The resulting scars, when touched together, were said to create a perfect fit, medieval romance at its most hardcore. Church records are full of panicked confessions from young women who'd acquired multiple perfect fits from different suitors. For those seeking subtler enhancements, there was vein painting, a delicate art where blue woad dye was injected into visible veins using hollow goose quills. The procedure, performed by barber surgeons, made pale noblewomen's veins appear dramatically visible beneath their skin, a coveted look mentioned in troubadour poems. Unfortunately, the technique often led to collapsed veins and gangrene, creating an unintended wounded heroine aesthetic. The frozen beauty treatment took advantage of the Little Ice Age's harsh winters. Noblewomen would sit barefaced in specially constructed ice chambers for precisely 33 minutes, Christ's age at crucifixion, believing the extreme cold would preserve their youth like meat in a snow cellar. Some enterprising alpine monasteries turned this into a business, offering eternal beauty ice slots by the half hour. Perhaps the most psychologically revealing trend was portrait bathing, a practice where women would float miniature portraits of themselves in rose water while reciting incantations. The theory held that the image would absorb the water's beautifying properties, which would then magically transfer to the subject. Surviving diaries describe women becoming obsessed with feeding their portrait images, adding honey, milk, or even drops of blood to the ritual. These extreme practices weren't just vanity run amok. They reflected a worldview where beauty was alchemy, where the body was mutable as clay. In an era before scientific medicine, the line between cosmetics and magic remained blurred. A 14th century French manuscript describes a beauty spell requiring the powdered bone of a hanged man, mixed with moon dew and applied during Venus ascent, essentially the medieval equivalent of a celebrity dermatologist's secret formula. What makes these rituals so fascinating is how they mirror our own era's beauty extremes, from vampire facials to bee venom treatments. The methods may have changed, thankfully, but the human desire to transform, to transcend our physical limits, remains unchanged. The medieval noblewoman injecting dye into her veins and the modern client getting lip filler are ultimately seeking the same thing, just with different levels of medical supervision. Alright, let me tell you the real tea about medieval beauty. And honey, it's darker than a nun's wimple at midnight. Picture this. You're a 14th century noblewoman staring into your polished bronze mirror, the iPhone of its day, knowing full well the lead paste you're about to smear on your face might just kill you by Tuesday. But here's the kicker. You'll do it anyway. Why? Because in this Game of Thrones meets America's Next Top Model, beauty wasn't just about looking pretty. It was your armor, your currency, sometimes your only shot at survival. Now, let me take you back to Marguerite's story, a French countess whose diary I stumbled upon in some dusty archive. This girl had it all, lands, titles, the works. But on her wedding morning, she's sobbing into her silk pillow because the court physician just informed her the bridal glow treatment requires leeches on her earlobes. It's for the humors, my lady, he says. Like that explains why she's basically signing up for medieval Botox with extra bloodletting. And get this, her maid, Marie, is over here grinding pearls into face powder like it's nobody's business. Makes you look divine, she whispers, conveniently leaving out the part where it'll make your skin peel off in sheets. But Marguerite's got no choice. That pig of a groom threatened to call off the wedding when he saw her summer freckles. So into the mercury-laced foundation she goes, looking like a ghost with commitment issues. Fast forward 3 years. Marguerite's now got the fashionable lead-poisoning cough and fingers turning gray at the tips. But here's the wild part. When she tries to quit the makeup, her own husband petitions the church to investigate her for sorcery. Turns out looking like a normal human was suspicious behavior back then. Meanwhile, down in the kitchens, Marie's got her own hustle going. She's stealing rose hips from the castle gardens to make safer creams for the servant girls. Them nobles can keep their death paste, she mutters while stirring. But even she's not immune. Caught rubbing beet juice on her cheeks one feast day, she gets whipped for aspiring above her station. The kicker? That same night, the Countess secretly buys Marie's beet recipe for triple the wages. The real plot twist comes when the Black Death hits. Suddenly, all those refined, pale faces are dropping like flies, while the peasant women who couldn't afford lead makeup, surviving in suspiciously good health. Marguerite has her come-to-Jesus moment watching her sister-in-law's makeup crack to reveal oozing black sores. She chucks every cosmetic into the moat, only to realize now she's got no protection against her husband's wandering eye. So what does our girl do? Starts her own underground beauty network, trading herbal remedies with Jewish apothecaries, who everyone pretends not to notice. When the church comes sniffing, she plays dumb. Oh this. Just humble prayer oils, Father. Never mind that it's the first effective acne treatment in centuries. Here's what kills me. We think we're so different with our 10-step routines and fillers. But that moment when Marguerite writes, I paint not to hide, but to remember the girl I was before the world got at her. That hits different, because whether it's 1350 or 2023, we're all just out here trying to hold on to ourselves in a world that wants to pick us apart. The real legacy of these medieval women isn't the crazy beauty hacks, though God knows we'll never top the live birds in your hair trend. It's that they played a rigged game and still found ways to cheat the system. When Marie finally opens her own herb shop after the plague, or when Marguerite starts aging naturally and gasp, owns it. That's the revolution. Not the poisons they used, but the small acts of rebellion that got us to safer ground. So next time you're feeling bad about your dark circles, remember Marguerite and her lead-filled moat. We've come a long way, baby, And we owe it to those women who looked death in the face and said, "Not today, Satan." Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go hug my toxin-free moisturizer and thank the medieval nuns who made it possible. Now let me tell you about the greatest hustle in medieval beauty history, the secret rebellion happening right under the church's nose. While bishops were busy condemning vanity, a whole underground network of women were rewriting the rules of beauty on their own terms. Take Sister Hildegard. No, not the famous composer. This was Hildegard the Unhinged at St. Gertrude's Abbey. While her superiors preached about modesty, this mad genius was running the medieval equivalent of a back alley spa in the herb garden. Her ledger from 1398 reads like a Sephora inventory. Angel water, rosehip oil infused with stolen communion wine for that divine glow. Virgin's blush, crushed raspberries mixed with beeswax, marketed as purity in a pot. Devil's Defiance, a minty mouth rinse that actually worked, hence the scandalous name. The best part? She coded all her recipes in psalm verses. That Psalm 91 verse 15 salve for spiritual dryness. Honey, that was her anti-aging eye cream. The church never caught on because who's going to question scripture? Meanwhile in Paris, Madame Claudette, a former prostitute turned facial artist, was serving looks so fierce they sparked riots. Her specialty? The faux fever treatment where she'd rub ginger on cheeks to create a natural flush. When church officials came knocking, she'd claim it was a medical poultice for humoral balance. The real power move? She trained all her girls to faint dramatically if questioned, creating such a scene that authorities would just leave to avoid the hassle. Over in Moorish Spain, Jewish perfumer Rachel was playing 4D chess with beauty standards. When sumptuary laws banned Jewish women from wearing certain scents, she invented invisible perfumes, oils that left no trace but created subtle aura effects. A drop behind the ears could make a suitor swear you smelled like fresh parchment. The medieval equivalent of your natural scent is intoxicating. Her greatest creation? The chameleon cream that changed scent based on body heat. Citrus when dancing, floral when still. The real MVP, though, was Beatrice of Flanders, that same radical neighbor who told off the bishop. This woman looked at centuries of beauty oppression and said nah. Her manifesto, scratched onto chicken parchment with a stolen quill, laid it out. If God made me in his image, then my wrinkles are divine. My scars are sacred. And if my natural smell offends you, perhaps you're standing too close. She walked barefaced through the marketplace, air-dried her silvering hair, and, most shockingly, aged visibly. Townsfolk called her a witch at first, then a saint, then finally just Trixie, the woman who somehow got more marriage proposals after 40 than most girls got in their teens. These women weren't anomalies. They were the thin line between beauty and brutality. For every poison peddler, there was a nun swapping out lead for zinc. For every abusive husband demanding a painted doll, there was a servant girl smuggling herbal remedies to her mistress. The records are patchy. Most were written by men who'd rather describe battle axes than face cream. But here's what we know. The lipstick revolt of 1432, when a London merchant tried to hike prices on cochineal dye, his entire stock mysteriously ended up in the Thames. An anonymous tipster noted the river ran pink for a week. The Great Eyebrow Rebellion. Servant women in Burgundy collectively stopped plucking their brows in 1456. Within a year, bushy became fashionable. The perfume plot. Jewish and Muslim perfumers secretly collaborated across religious lines to create the first alcohol-free fragrances when the church banned intoxicating scents. What these women understood, and what we often forget, is that beauty standards aren't laws of nature. They're choices. And for every choice made by kings and popes, there were 100 women finding ways to opt out, undermine, or straight up sabotage the system. So the next time someone tells you to just accept some ridiculous beauty trend, remember Sister Hildegard's Saul-numbered face creams and Madame Claudette's strategic feigning spells. The game's been rigged for centuries, but so have the workarounds. Now let me take you behind the tapestry to where the real magic happened. the medieval beauty black markets that would make a modern drug dealer look like a choir boy. Because where there's oppression, honey, there's always an underground economy thriving in the shadows. Picture this. It's 1385 in Paris, and in a cellar beneath a butcher's shop, a dozen women are gathered around a cauldron like witches at a Tupperware party. But instead of Eye of Newt, they're stirring up the hottest contraband in town, lead-free foundation. The recipe? Stolen from a Jewish apothecary's daughter, smuggled in a hollowed-out loaf of bread. 1 part zinc oxide, stolen from a painter's workshop. 2 parts rice flour, smuggled from Venice at triple the price. A splash of rose water, bribed from a monk's private stash. This is the medieval equivalent of a Sephora heist, ladies. And the mastermind? A former nun-turned-cosmetic pirate named Sister Genevieve who lost her faith, but found her calling when she realized the church's holy white powder was literally killing her sisters. Over in London's docks, the scene's even wilder. Sailors' wives run a thriving porcelain exchange where a vial of Venetian rouge, lead-based, equals 3 yards of Flemish lace. A pot of Moorish coal equals 2 chickens and a promise to name your next child after the traitor. The real prize? A single almond-sized lump of Chinese pearl powder, worth its weight in silver and guarded like the crown jewels. But the real drama's in the supply chain. When the Bishop of Rouen banned scented gloves in 1391, within weeks there's a new product, spiritually purified hand coverings. Same gloves, now blessed by a rogue priest. When sumptuary laws limit silk veils to nobility, suddenly every merchant's daughter is wearing linen of exceptional weave that just happens to shimmer suspiciously. The most brazen operation? The hair highway, running from Rome to Burgundy. Peasant girls grow their hair extra long, then sell it to wig makers through a network of midwives and washerwomen. The going rate? 2 years' growth equals 1 silver coin. But here's the kicker. The wig makers dye most of it blonde, using that cursed urine saffron mix, meaning half the nobility are unknowingly wearing wigs made from dairy maids' braids. The ultimate peasant revenge. Men are in on it too. A blacksmith in Cologne gets rich selling devotional medals that just happen to be the exact size and shape of beauty patches. A scribe in Florence makes a fortune forging medical exemption certificates for women who don't want to pluck their hairlines. Even the clergy participate. One enterprising monk starts bottling holy water that suspiciously removes lead makeup better than regular water. Turns out he'd mixed in vinegar, the original micellar water. The punishments if caught? Brutal. A woman in Ghent gets her hands boiled for selling unauthorized rouge. A Milanese barber loses his tongue for giving noblewomen undue lip definition. But the demand never stops because here's the dirty truth. For all their preaching, the medieval elite needed this black market more than anyone. Take Countess Isabel of Provence. By day, she's condemning vanity from her high horse. By night, she's paying triple for that illegal Moorish lip stain because her husband's new mistress is 20 years younger. Or Bishop Guillaume, publicly burning perfumed gloves in the square, while privately bribing a glove maker to line his with the same scent. The real irony? Many sinful products were actually safer than the church-approved alternatives. That banned Moorish coal, made from harmless soot and almond oil. The illicit saffron hair rinses, far gentler than legal quicklime treatments. Even the underground lead-free foundation caused fewer deaths than the blessed rouge. So next time you complain about modern beauty standards, remember those medieval badasses mixing zinc oxide and candlelight. They proved one eternal truth. Where there's a will to look fabulous, there's always a way, even if you have to hide it in a loaf of bread. So here we are at the end of our journey through medieval vanity and valor. But before you close this book, let me tell you one last story about old Marguerite, the countess who threw her lead makeup into the moat all those years ago. Years after the plague, when her hair had gone silver and her laugh lines were deep enough to plant seeds in, young Agnes, now grown with daughters of her own, found her standing barefaced in the castle gardens. "You were right, little bird," Marguerite said, crushing rose petals between her fingers to stain her lips. "We painted ourselves into cages of our own making. And that's the real legacy these medieval women left us. Not the poison powders or the dangerous dyes, but the moment when generations of women finally looked in their polished bronze mirrors and asked, who benefits when I suffer for beauty? Was it God? The church? The husbands who wanted living dolls? Or was it the alchemists selling lead as salvation? The merchants getting rich off peasant hair? The system that taught women their greatest power was in being decorative rather than dangerous? From Hildegard's psalm-coated creams to Claudette's strategic fainting spells, from Rachel's chameleon perfumes to Beatrice's glorious wrinkles, these women passed down more than beauty secrets. They left us a battle plan. So the next time you're tempted to apologize for your dark circles, or your gray hairs, or your natural face, remember, you come from a long line of women who smuggled safety in loaves of bread, who turned back alleys into apothecaries, who looked death in the face and said not today with nothing but rose hips and attitude. That's not just history, darling. That's your inheritance. Now go use it.